Shalom, Erev Tov, good evening, and welcome to our daily TV7 Israel news bulletin, broadcast from Jerusalem. Israeli President Isaac Herzog emphasizes his hope for regime change in Iran. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan asserts that a refusal to accept defeat by the Kurdish SDF militias in northeastern Syria would be suicide. The U.S. Central Command says it expects the Damascus regime not hinder the relocation of Islamic State prisoners from Syria to Iraq. Israel is in a better strategic position on various fronts, but it cannot sit on its laurels in any way. This remark was made by Israeli President Isaac Herzog in a Q&A session at the World Economic Forum in Davos, warning further that Jerusalem's enemies are trying to rehabilitate themselves.
So I would say that, first of all, we are in a better position after fighting a war of various fronts, heroically and bravely, but the dark clouds are still hanging out there. For example, it is clear to us that the Iranians are regrouping, and they haven't stopped for one moment in their plight to spread terror all over the world, as well as move towards their big grand plans of weapons of mass destruction. We know and that Hezbollah is trying to do the same, meaning to regroup, rebuild its force, and perhaps wants kind of to deceive us that it's not doing so. And we know that the Houthis are out there still conniving and planning terror attacks. We should not sit on our laurels in any way. And of course in Hamas is still there in Gaza, holding our last hostage, Ran Gvili, who we are screaming out loud to bring him back home according to the agreements that were agreed upon. So I would say, all in all, the balance sheet is better, but we should not be kind of over optimistic and believe that all is well, because we live in a dangerous circumstance and, of course, in a volatile region.
Israel's head of state further addressed the plight of the Iranian people, voicing unambiguous hope for regime change.
The Iranian people are yearning for change. The Iranian people deserve change. They deserve decent life. The Iranian people live under a very oppressive regime, a regime which has mowed thousands of its citizens and is torturing and is jailing and is destroying thousands of families, perhaps tens of thousands, perhaps much more, all around Iran, trying to crush the natural demand of human beings for a better life and for freedom.
The Israeli president was further asked about Jerusalem's perspective vis-à-vis Damascus.
We look at Syria very cautiously. On the one hand, the Syrian people deserve a better life. And the fall of the Assad regime, which is another example when people got fed up and how it happened, and a lot had to do with Israel's, battle to defend itself, and by that also changing the entire regional structure. We are watching it very cautiously because we are worried about our allies, the Druze on the south, and we have certain requirements as to their fate. We had received really terrible reports of what happened in Sweden a few months back, including sexual violence against women, including terrible atrocities. Now we got reports about what happened to the Kurds. It is also extremely worrying. We are watching that as well. I think the world has to know that it cannot be done by way of killing your own people and your own nation. But again, I say the overall aim should be a quiet and peaceful life and a peaceful coexistence with Syria. And we wish well to the Syria and its leaders so that they can bring a better future for the Syrian people.
Asked whether Israel could trust the regime in Damascus amid repeated massacres against minorities throughout the country, which are clearly not keen on living under an oppressive regime. President Herzog noted that the leadership in Jerusalem listens to Washington and other regional actors who are determined to have Damascus succeed, irrespective of its jihadist nature.
We listen to our friends, the Americans, who are very much involved, and other nations in the region who are operating and meeting with President Shara and his team, who I know they're trying their best. And I say always, my mom taught me always a sentence from childhood: the proof of the pudding is in the eating. We have to see that it really goes in the right direction, because as Senator Lindsey Graham tweeted this week, there were phenomena that were extremely disturbing, and I think world attention should be focused on that too.
It is important to know that the Damascus regime agreed to a 4-day ceasefire with the Kurdish-led SDF, during the course of which the Kurdish leadership will be required to accept the terms of their surrender and integrate into the Damascus-led state.
From our side, the Syrian government has agreed to the following. We will grant the Syrian Democratic Forces a 4-day period for consultations, internal consultations, to develop a detailed plan for the practical mechanisms for integrating the area. In the event of the agreement on that plan, the Syrian forces will not enter the centers of Hasaka and Qamishli cities and will remain on their outskirts until the detailed plan is finalized and a time frame has been put for the full integration of those areas.
During the 4-day ceasefire, with the second day soon coming to its end, Syrian forces and Turkish-backed militias have essentially encircled the Kurdish regions, threatening to launch a decisive attack if the terms of surrender are refused. Meanwhile, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan asserted in an address to his Islamist AK party in Ankara that the rejection of the terms granted to the Kurdish militias would mean suicide.
Dün varılan ateşkes anlaşmasından büyük bir
We are very pleased with the ceasefire agreement reached yesterday.
daha fazla kan akmadan
Our hope is that this issue will be resolved permanently without further bloodshed, that the terrorist organization, which is confined to certain areas in northern Syria, will lay down its arms, it will disband, and that further conflict will be avoided.
verilmemesidir.
It is already impossible for the terrorist organization to continue its existence in the areas where it is confined.
Değildir.
It is very clear that resorting to provocations at this stage would mean suicide.
Anlamına geleceği çok açıktır.
The Turkish leader continued by addressing his phone conversation with President Donald Trump, which focused on the situation in Syria.
Dün Amerikan Başkanı Sayın Trump'la
We had a productive phone call with American President Trump, during which we discussed these issues.
gerçekleştirdik.
We consulted with him on many critical matters that will contribute to Syria's security, including the joint fight against the Islamic State.
Kendisiyle istişare ettik.
Allah willing, with the implementation of yesterday's agreement, the remaining territories under the organization's control and the civilians living there will also regain their freedom as soon as possible, and a unified Syria, a Syria where everyone feels safe, will thus be built.
Kendini güvende hissettiği bir Suriye böylece inşa edilmiş olur.
It is important to explain that U.S. envoy for Syria, Tom Barrack, effectively praised the Damascus regime on Tuesday for joining the global coalition to defeat ISIS, signaling, as he put it, a westward pivot and cooperation with the U.S. on counterterrorism, underscoring also Damascus's willingness and position to take over security responsibilities, including control of ISIS detention facilities and camps. Nevertheless, U.S. Central Command said it was coordinating with Damascus the transfer of up to 7,000 Islamic State detainees, and in a phone conversation between U.S. Central Command Commander Admiral Bradford Cooper and Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara, the former expressed his expectations for Syrian forces, as well as all other forces under Damascus command, to avoid any actions that could interfere, clearly indicating a lack of American trust in the Damascus regime of being able to guard the thousands of Islamic State fighters. Returning to Davos, where U.S. President Donald Trump has co-signed with 20 other countries the Board of Peace into creation, an institution that will aim to revive the Gaza Strip. To realize his vision, President Trump re-emphasized the imperative return of the remains of Israeli hostage Ran Gvili and the disarmament of the Islamist Hamas as a base for success.
And I've been very clear that Hamas must return that last remaining deceased hostage as well, and that will be the full commitment. And then we get on to other things, and we're committed to ensuring Gaza is demilitarized, properly governed, and beautifully rebuilt.
It is interesting to note that Belgium, Canada, Hungary, and Bulgaria are the only Western countries that have thus far accepted President Donald Trump's invitation to join the Board of Peace. Thank you for watching TV7 Israel News. Please keep the peace of Jerusalem and redemption of Israel in your prayers. I'm Jonathan Hessen, wishing you an Erev Mevorach, and God willing, until our next update, Shalom from Jerusalem.